Turn it or burn it. Well, around here we say turn it, don't burn it. All this wood right here in this stack is trimmings from different logs that I've churned over the last few years, and it was on its way down to the other end of the property where I keep firewood. It didn't look like this. It had, you know, bark on it here and there. Well, I ended up trimming them up to smaller pieces, put it in my drying box, and it's nice and dry. This is elm from the tree we had trimmed a couple years ago. The walnut from our friend's tree. I've got some cherry that I got about 5 years ago, and also some maple. What I plan on making is a firewood dizzy bowl. So everything I use in it potentially was going to be firewood. It may not be the most colorful bowl because this is what I have, and all the other ones I usually go out and buy pretty expensive exotic woods, and I want to use this stuff that was basically free and save it from the firewood pile. That includes this mahogany here. I picked this up at a yard sale. It was in a stack that said firewood free. Well, I didn't plan on making firewood out of it, so I may put this in here. So it gets to go in there even though it came this way, but it was on its way to be firewood. Same thing with this. This was in a box. I bought some tools at one garage sale, and they had that box there, and they knew I was interested in wood. Do you want that? And I said, sure. That probably will work just fine. So I think it's basswood. It's kind of soft. I'm going to go ahead and get this cut into thin strips, and I'll get them glued together. I'm not going to make you watch all of that, but maybe a little bit. What's going to be cool on this, I think, is the way I cut the rings. I'm going to try something totally different. It should make cutting those rings not only fun, but easy. So I'll see you shortly when we get the pieces all cut up. So I cut a lot of pieces and I arranged them. I think this looks not too bad. And it is a firewood dizzy bowl, so it's what I had laying around. I didn't use that basswood. It is kind of soft, and I think the maple that I had looks every bit as good. So I'll go ahead and get them glued together. And I've got these marks on here, so I make sure I put them in the right direction. I'll just get a few of them laying here, get some glue on them. It's kind of hard to apply it with this really cool applicator that viewer Mark sent me a few months ago, and I did use it once, but because of the different heights I really can't get them all without moving them a little bit. It's like that even right there, but that's not a problem. I just spread them out like this. The last time you saw this wood, I had just glued it together this way, like a cutting board. Well, it's been a couple days, it's been kind of cold, but I came out here and I set it up on the bandsaw and I ripped them into thinner pieces. I do have that bandsaw slicing sled that I made, and it does a good job with a fine-tooth blade, but I used a 6-tooth, cut much faster, and it cut pretty smooth. I took these pieces over to my milling machine and I hot glued them down on a flat surface. Then I machined them down to 180 thousandths. What I need to do now is different than what I've done on dizzy bowls before. First, I'll show you how I'm going to glue these together, and I'll just show you one of them. Got a piece of plexiglass. I've waxed it up. I have already marked it to make sure I have the right side up and the right side together, because you could mess that up pretty easy. I'm just going to get glue on the joint on one of these. push them together like so. And I think you can see this. I'm going to slide it off the end of this board. Use that spring clamp to hold it down. Going to go to this side. Same thing. I still see I got a nice joint here. I'll let that sit. I have one more of the pieces of plexiglass. I'll work my way through it, and when I come back, you're going to get to watch me try something for the first time. I sure hope it works, because it was a lot of work just to get to here. Viewer warning. You are about to watch maybe the worst job I have ever done cutting rings for a dizzy bowl. I had this brilliant idea. The only problem was I was not understanding the origin setup in the software, and I kept thinking I had it right, and I didn't. Once I figured out what I had to do, it was okay. Meanwhile, I may have ruined a number of rings, and this just might look horrible, but you know what? We're going to go ahead and finish it. So hang in there with me and let's see how it turns out. So this is some stock for a dizzy bowl. I have 4 planks like this I glued up. I'm going to see if I can cut rings out of this, and there's other ways to do it. I just wanted to try this, and I'll get it in position, centered, and we'll cut. I think this gets 4 rings out of this piece, and hopefully it works. So let me get this set up. We'll come back. I'll get the laser going. You can see it in action. So I had 4 of these boards the same size, and this is the last one I did, and it came out pretty much perfect. So did the previous 2 of that. The first one I pretty much messed up. I'll show you that here pretty soon. So the one that I messed up was actually the very first one I did, and it was all my fault. I picked the wrong origin for the machine to cut, and I couldn't see it because the laser was cutting and it's bright, and I had the dark glasses on, and I don't know if we're going to save this or not, but I'm certainly going to try. So it's been 3 weeks since I tried to ruin one of these rings, and if you look close you can see those cuts are not centered on the outside ring, and they almost go all the way through. Whether I can save it or not, I'm not sure, but we're going to try. So I'm going to go ahead and glue all this together. I'll just show you the pictures of it, because I'm not sure if I'm going to make a dizzy bowl or if I'm just going to make some firewood. So the way this works, I had 4 discs to begin with. I cut them into rings. I'll take the largest ring out of each disc. Those get stacked together. Then I go back to the very first disc and do the same thing, and they just kind of build up and create a taper that gives you a nice wall thickness. Although with what I have here, I don't know what I'm going to end up with. And I use flat boards up on top just to put some pressure on it while I'm gluing. Getting close to what will be the bottom of the bowl, I wanted to double check the rings and see if they were fairly centered, and they're off a little bit, but I still have hope that we're going to save something here. So I'll put a link in the description for a couple of my dizzy bowls that really turned out nice, and you'll see exactly how this is supposed to be done. I just lined up the last couple of rings on the lathe, and I used this little accessory that I made on the 3D printer. That worked quite well. Let it sit on there for about 15 minutes. I brought it back over here, put it under the press. I've got some pressure on it. There's probably about that many layers that haven't really completely set up. I'll let it sit all night, and tomorrow, well, we'll see what we can make out of this. See you then. Well, it is the next day, and sticking with the theme of making this out of firewood, this was also one of the strips that I had cut off some logs when I was making bowl blanks and dried it in my drying box. It's a very pretty piece. Is this going to hold together? I can't guarantee it. Just because of those rings that almost cut all the way through and I messed them up. And it's not real pretty looking right now, but you need to get it turned. You kind of see a dizzy bowl in there. So I've got the tenon on here. I'm going to get it mounted up in the chuck, and we're going to find out real soon if this holds together. Alright, we're going to start on the inside, the 1/2-inch bowl gouge, doing about 900 RPM. Pretty much going to knock the corners off and have a good look at what we have here. I stopped here and examined what I have, and I kind of made a decision I should turn the outside to make sure that I don't have an area that's totally cut through. And I was doing a lot of thinking here, and I didn't mention that's what I was going to do. Alright, you can see this is pretty black. Well, that's the edges where the laser was cutting. That'll clean right up, and we're about ready to find out how much stock I actually have here. That is really close to being cleaned up. It looks kind of cool. Looks pretty cool. Well, this has me concerned here. Everything has me concerned. Alright, we're going to keep going, get the outside cleaned up, and we'll have a good look at it. It's actually got some nice reflection in there. I'm going to take care of this top edge here. That helps. Now we're getting thin. Now we're getting real thin. So I stopped many times in this process right here, and it would have been really hard to show everything, so I just decided you didn't need to see me stop and measure about 100 times. It's approaching an 1/8 inch thick. I still have some areas that have not cleaned up. I'll try the negative rake scraper now and see how much I can clean up. I don't think I'll get this one. What I'll do is use the Minwax water-based sanding sealer, and I'll sand it with probably 100 grit. It'll make a slurry, and maybe we can camouflage this and make it look closer to wood than burnt wood. So let's go ahead and do that. Got the bottom cleaned up really nice, but that was 3 layers stacked on top of each other. Just like to get these dark lines out of there. I already sanded the inside. I didn't show that. I've sanded the outside to 80. I'll go to 150 now, and this is how I sanded it. I have the lathe in reverse. Sand's pretty easy. Then I'll go to 220, 320, and 400. And I'll come back and we'll get a finish on it. Well, I've got it all sanded up. You can still hear my overhead dust filter going, and I'm going to keep it going for a while. But I was going to try to disguise those lines that cut across the rings. I don't think I'll even try to do that. It's going to be a reminder of something you did that you shouldn't have done. Kind of like I remember falling off my bicycle doing something when I was a kid, and I decided I probably should never do that again. So I'll go ahead and use the water-based Minwax, starting with the sanding sealer, and then we'll get that all sanded up. I'll show you what it looks like in here. It's not real exciting when you put the first coat on, because it's kind of a milky color. I'm going to do that. I'll go ahead and get this all finished up, come back, we'll part it off of that block I have on here, and we'll decide whether I should put it on display or whether we should maybe take it in the backyard and roast marshmallows with it. I'll ask you guys' opinion at the end, and maybe I'll do whatever the most votes get. So, it looks like a Dizzy Bowl. I showed the sanding sealer going on the inside. The polyacrylic goes on exactly the same. I decided I'll skip showing it on the outside, and I'll get right to the next step. So I got the last of the polyacrylic on this last night, and I didn't put as much as I usually would on a Dizzy Bowl because I really like a nice depth to the finish. But I figured I really didn't want it to amplify the marks where it tried to cut through, even though they're not bothering me as much as they used to. But I just felt like I would have a less deeper looking finish. I did go over it with Axe Abrasive paste and the new polishing paste with Carnauba wax. Right now I'm ready to part it off. Got the lathe running about 750 RPM. I just sharpened my very old parting tool, and I think I want it off right about here. I'm going to grab a little saw. This got a pretty fine blade on it. There we go. Oh, that'll come off pretty easy. I'll get all that done, and I think I can sign that even though it's walnut. And I'll be back and we'll go over what we just accomplished. I started dreading this moment about midway point of the video when I figured I totally messed it up. But you know what? I'm kind of happy to show it to you. Doesn't look all that bad. It's got a nice pattern. And there's some black lines in there. They're not concentric with the circle. And that was my fault. It wasn't the machines, it wasn't the software's. It was my understanding of how the software centers itself. Here's the underside. Looks pretty nice. And indeed, we've got some black lines here. Not concentric with it, but it doesn't look all that bad. It's 8 inches in diameter. It's 3 1/4 inches tall, and the walls are an 1/8 inch. And I cut it down that thin just to try to get everything cleaned up the best I could. And it really feels nice with that thickness. I use Minwax water-based sanding sealer, Minwax polyacrylic, and Axe Abrasive paste, and the polish restoring paste for the finish. Not so bad. Is this the best Dizzy Bowl I have ever made? Nope. This one is. Tell me what you think about it. I'll put a link in the description, and you can have a look at that and let me know what you think. So, I tried something new. It didn't quite work out. I might do it again, and I know I won't have circles that are not concentric because I solved that problem. And like I said, this can be a reminder. Make sure you have things right before you do it. And I kind of hinted at something I probably should tell you. So I think I was in the 5th grade. A bunch of us had this bicycle that we would coast down the steepest hill in northwest Portland. It was Raleigh Street. It was very, very steep. You know what? The bike didn't have brakes. We didn't care. We just coasted until it stopped, pushed it back up. When it was my turn, I got on it, got to the bottom, everything was good, and then the front wheel fell off. So, my lesson there is make sure that the axle bolts are tight before you ride it down a steep hill. Here, make sure it's cutting circles before you do it, or cutting concentric circles. So, I hope you enjoyed this little fiasco of saving a bowl, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did like the video, do me a favor, click that like button and feel free to leave a comment. Both of those things will really help my channel grow. I do lots of different types of turnings and you never know what might be next, so be sure to subscribe if you want to see more. And a special thanks to all my current subscribers. You really mean a lot to me. So, till the next time, see you later.